Think of the origins of mathematics, and one name inevitably comes to mind: Pythagoras. He has been celebrated as the singular father of modern geometry. His legacy is permanently attached to the right triangle. The Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, is the proof we all learn as the starting point for geometric logic. Esoteric traditions view him as an ancient mystic, a master of numerology, who supposedly identified a specific mathematical pattern within cosmic vibrations. There is a massive blind spot in this narrative. Despite his monumental fame as a thinker, Pythagoras never actually wrote a single word. In fact, looking at the historical records from his own lifetime, there is no contemporary evidence connecting him to the theorem that bears his name. If the man left no texts and didn't invent the math, we have a historical forgery. To find the true authors, we must dig backward through history. The first layer of our excavation takes us to the early centuries of the Roman Empire, hundreds of years after Pythagoras lived. During this period, writers like Iamblichus and Porphyry authored the first comprehensive biographies of the ancient philosopher. They had a clear motive. They needed a divine sage to compete with rising religious movements, so they blended the memory of Pythagoras with the philosophical ideals of Plato. These Roman-era biographies began injecting supernatural abilities into his life story, claiming he could recall past lives and perform miracles. This propaganda worked. It cemented the myth of Pythagoras as a magical cult leader, effectively burying his true historical identity. Digging deeper into the 4th century BC, the era of Plato and Aristotle, reveals how the myth was constructed in the classical Greek world. Because Pythagoras left no original texts, he created an authorship vacuum. Later philosophers realized they could take their own advanced number theories and project them backward onto him. Attributing a new discovery to an unquestionable ancient sage provided instant historical authority for their own ideas. Even the early Pythagorean school was split. It was divided between the mathematicians, who focused on science, and the acousmetici. The acousmetici were religious followers. They adhered strictly to his shamanistic rules and taboos, showing little interest in actual mathematics. If the historical Pythagoras was primarily the leader of this religious sect, it raises the question of where the mathematical followers were getting their science. To find the answer, we have to travel to ancient Mesopotamia, over 1,000 years before Pythagoras was even born. Historians examining old Babylonian cuneiform texts have discovered mathematical proofs that predate the Greek era by over a millennium. These archaic clay tablets contain records of advanced metric algebra. The etched squares and diagonal lines map out geometric progressions. The Babylonians used a diagonal rule. These cuneiform markings calculate the hypotenuse, proving the theorem was standard long before the Greeks. This circular geometric diagram, surrounded by dense calculations, shows that advanced geometry was a staple of Mesopotamian scribal math. This evidence confirms that the geometry we attribute to Pythagoras was actually a Mesopotamian discovery. These clay tablets demonstrate that the proof of the theorem happened long before the Greeks arrived on the scene. Based on this evidence, we have to redefine Pythagoras. He was a charismatic philosopher guru, not a scientific pioneer. His probable historical role was as a cultural bridge. He likely absorbed ancient Near Eastern mathematical knowledge and carried those concepts west. Once there, he repackaged this imported science, embedding it within a mystical lifestyle for his dedicated followers. His historical contribution was the marketing and mystification of mathematics, rather than its discovery. Our desire for a single named hero often clashes with the reality of how knowledge evolves. The foundation of this math was built by countless anonymous scribes in the ancient Near East, pressing their discoveries into wet clay. While the name Pythagoras remains historical shorthand, the geometry we credit him with belongs to a much older world.